Welcome to the Open to Hope Show. I'm your host, Dr. Heidi Horsley, and I'm here today talking about a subject so near and dear to my heart. It's the reason I started the Open to Hope Foundation, and we are going to be talking about sibling loss. And the name of the show is going to be The Overlooked Grief of Losing a Sibling. And I'm here with 4 people that can talk to us about their own, some of them have their own sibling loss, and some of them work with people that have had sibling losses. So I will be talking with Judy, Jason, Claire, and Adam. Judy Lipson has had both sisters die. She is now the only surviving child in her family. Jane was just 22 when she died in a car accident. And Margie died at 35 after a long battle with eating disorders. Judy founded Celebration of Sisters, which is an annual ice skating fundraiser. She did that for 10 years, and she actually skates in it and was amazing. And this benefits Mass General Hospital. She also writes for the Open to Hope Foundation. You can go in there and read a lot of the articles she's written. She wrote one recently about losing her dad and how that brought up memories of losing her sisters. And she's recently keynoted at Bereaved Parents USA Conference. She also presents workshops at the Compassionate Friends. So welcome to our show, Judy.
Thank you for having me, Heidi.
Okay, and next to Judy is Jason, another Compassionate Friends person that I know. Jason lost his sister Lauren in a car accident when she was just 24 years old. He is a somatic grief therapist and has a master's degree in psychology from Columbia University. Jason is a business owner and co-founded Shine Yoga Center in New Jersey. He is very involved with the Compassionate Friends and presents numerous workshops, and he runs a virtual meeting for siblings every Thursday at 6:30 p.m. So if you're a sibling out there or you know one, please join this group. Next to Jason is Claire Sharkey. Claire used to be one of the crew for this show, Open to Hope, many years ago. I met Claire over 10 years ago because she was one of my students at Columbia University in the School of Social Work. And then we became friends, and now we're colleagues. So today, Claire is a licensed clinical social worker, and she is the clinical and program director of COPE. COPE is a nonprofit supporting families living with the loss of a child. She also has her own private practice specializing in grief and bereavement. And next to her is the executive director of COPE. Adam Rabinovich is the executive director of COPE. And again, this is a nonprofit grief and healing organization dedicated to helping parents and families living with the loss of a child. His sister Marnie died when she was just under 2 years old, and at the time, Adam, you were about 4, right?
Sure.
Okay, and Adam is he was previously the executive director of Goal and the deputy director of Link. So welcome to our show, Adam.
Thanks for having us, Heidi.
So, as you all know, my brother and cousin died together at 17 in a car accident, and it really turned my world upside down. It was the first huge, significant loss I had ever had. And the first question I have for all of you is, what do you think is unique about sibling loss? Judy?
Well, sibling is somebody you think you're going to live your whole life with, and it's a very unique relationship. It's somebody, who else are you going to, complain about your parents with, and who you're going to share your life stories with, who knows you better than anybody else, maybe even better than you know yourself. And it's a shock, and it's a loss that people don't understand, and it doesn't get the same respect as any other loss.
Why do you think that is?
Why? Because siblings are kind of always taking a back seat because we're left taking care of parents or other siblings or other family members, and nobody ever asks. They say, how are your parents? They never ask, how are you?
It is interesting, the messages that we get after our brother or sisters die. And I always say, it's often not from our parents, it's from everybody else that's telling us these things or saying these things. So Jason, what are your thoughts on about what is unique?
Yeah, so there's 2 things. One is that it's a very invalidated form of grief, like Judy was saying, is because there shouldn't be a hierarchy in grief, but the reality is there is.
Yeah.
And a child loss takes a way bigger preference than losing a sibling. And even in fact, recently I just went on Instagram to look at some hashtags about sibling loss, and there were so few. Like, there's a lot more now, but there was almost none.
Wow.
And it like the parents were up there, loss of a spouse was up there, and then the sibling loss was way down the list. Actually, I think a pet made it above sibling loss. So I was like, yes, this is a very invalidated form of grief.
And this is recently that you just did this.
Pretty recently. I mean, there are a lot more now, but not, a little while back it was way down there. And the other thing is that it changes your identity. Like I visualized my whole life with my sister being in it, and as soon as she died, almost instantaneously, I had to like almost recreate myself, because the person I was is no longer there anymore. Because that whole vision of where I saw myself in 20 years, 30 years, pretty much ended the minute that I found out she passed.
Well, it's interesting, Jason, because you and Judy are only children, but you're not only children. But you are only children. It's a strange thing. I mean, you grew up with sisters, but now you're singletons. Yeah.
I don't see it that way. I still see myself as being a big brother. Part of my identity has shifted, but that has not shifted for me. I even talk about Lauren in the present because I do believe that she's still here with me, not in physical body, obviously, but her energy is still with me all the time.
I love this. And Judy, do you see yourself as an only child?
No, I struggled with that. I always say now I'm the middle of three, and sadly I lost both my sisters.
Yeah.
I can't, they're who I am, they're my identity, and they're still my identity.
That makes sense. You'd be a different person if they had never been in your life, if you had been raised as a single child.
Right. That I'm still that middle child of three.
That makes sense. And Claire, what are your thoughts about what is unique? And I know that you work with kids that have had siblings die through COPE.
Yeah, and through COPE I was also really fortunate for a year to facilitate one of our adult sibling loss groups. And my mother actually, she's the oldest of 10, but has lost 3 of her siblings.
Wow.
One of them being her closest sister when she was 21. And through that group, it made me learn and understand so much 50 odd years later how much that loss has impacted her and her brothers as well, but especially the loss of her sister. So I agree with everything that's been said, and I also think what's so challenging about it and what's invalidating is because you're not the next of kin, a lot of choice is also taken away from you as well. In terms of how you're going to grieve, how you're going to memorialize this person, because the parent or the spouse can, be the first person who gets to make those decisions, and their grief is the one that often is front and center. And so there's also a lot of choice that's taken away when you're trying to grieve. And I've noticed that and heard that a lot with siblings that I've been working with, and how do then they find some type of understanding of how to move forward and how to work through it when they're not in control of it.
That is so interesting you're saying this. I mean, my mother's not on set today, and I don't think she's going to watch the show. So I will tell you, and if she does, that's okay, but there's things that I haven't even told her about that bothered me a lot when my brother died. One of the things was that nobody consulted me or my sisters about the music that should have been played at the funeral. And while the music was great, it wasn't what we would have chosen. It wasn't the music that he loved. The other thing that happened was that my father opened up my brother's room right after he died to his friends and said, go in and take anything you want. And they went in and basically cleared it out. And I feel that me and my sister should have gone in first, because by the time we got there, there was a lot of things that we would have wanted that weren't there. So, but it's interesting, but it didn't even occur to my parents to ask us, because they were so involved in their own grief. So it's interesting that you're saying that sometimes siblings don't have a voice and they can be overlooked, even unintentionally also. So Adam, what are your thoughts about this?
At COPE, I've heard again and again that siblings too often are the forgotten grievers or the forgotten mourners. And I'm so proud at COPE and through all of the work that we're all doing that we're together helping to shift that and make sure that the journeys, the voices, the connections for bereaved and grieving siblings are strong and validated and don't take a back seat. And on a personal note, although I lost my sister at such a young age that I realize now today that I'm not grieving her loss, I was too young, I am a bereaved sibling. And it took me only a couple of years with my work at COPE to look up what does bereaved actually mean. And if I got it right, it means bereft of, lacking of, and if I think I heard Jason particularly say, not having that relationship in my life. In my case, it's 40 plus years of not having my sister, that sister in my life, whatever that relationship would have been like, is an absence. So while I'm not actively grieving, I'm certainly bereaved and bereft
and
of
thinking
of her
about the future that you may have had she lived.
Exactly.
Which is different.
Exactly.
And how young is the youngest person at COPE? I mean, how young can you be to get services at COPE?
Yeah, great question. So we continue to build out our programs for an increasingly diverse group of bereaved and grieving family members. So the youngest kids in one of our programs in particular are age 7, and many of them are living with the loss of a brother or sister, a sibling. And we host, and Claire talked a little bit, and I'm sure we'll cover more together, about support for adult siblings. And the adult siblings living with the loss of their own sibling go all the way up in age in their life. And we try and create spaces where the 7-year-olds and the teenagers and the young adults and the middle-aged adults can find common connection points with other bereaved siblings.
I love this. I love how vast the ages are and how they all come together. Claire, what are your thoughts about helpful things that people can do?
I really like when siblings connect with other siblings, particularly because it's such a disenfranchised group, and it's a space that you don't have to take care of the parents, you don't have to take care of the spouse, you don't have to take care of the nieces and nephews that you're trying to support as well and be there for. I really love when the siblings are just siblings and get to be together and focus on their own loss. And so I love that our groups and other groups that I recommend to siblings have that space.
Well, it's so interesting because I see Jason and Judy nodding because the three of us are very involved in the sibling program at Compassionate Friends. And sometimes the parents that have had children die will look at us and go, wait a minute, they're like having a lot of fun. And I don't see like a lot of grieving going on, but I'm like, yeah, because we're just being in the presence of Judy and Jason. I know they understand me and they understand what I'm dealing with because they've been there. And that in and of itself is healing. What are your thoughts about it, Jason?
I have lots of thoughts. First of all, because exactly what you were saying is that like my Thursday night crew on the sibling support, they are tight. Like they even call each other, like when they're having an issue, they'll text back and forth. So the community is really critical. The other thing is that making sure you're taking care of your body. I know when I first lost Lauren, which was 25 years ago, talk therapy wasn't going to be really solve the issue that I was going through. It would have been part of it, but I needed to find something else. So it directed me right to lifestyle, like yoga and meditation and healthy eating. We forget how important it is to take care and nourish our bodies in order to be able to deal with the grief more effectively. And when I work with clients, we start right with the body because, you know, without the energy and vitality, all the other stuff is so much more challenging. So, like, and that could be.
So you have a practice and work with clients around these things.
Yes, absolutely.
I love this.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And we start with like, how is the grief being held in your body? Where are you feeling it? What are you noticing? And this way, you understand how the grief buries in there. Because if you don't deal with it on even a physiological level, it's going to trigger you at other different points of your life. So. Making sure you take care of that first is the foundation from growing from there.
Well, and the interesting part is, Jason, and you know this, we focus so much on the psychological and emotional piece, and sometimes we ignore the physical, but we don't realize that the physical is completely connected to the other two.
Oh, and I think that's why it should be first. Like
absolutely, I agree with you.
I talk to therapists and they're like, oh yeah, I recommend yoga. I mean, no, like you need to start with some sort of, you know, physical practice, because even if you deal with the grief in your mind and in your heart and not in the body, you know, you experience another loss, you're going right back there because the cells remember.
The pain body.
And the cell, it goes right back there. And even some of the clients I've worked with say, oh, I worked on this loss, but then another loss comes up and they go right back because they haven't released the grief from their cells. And when you can do that, then you can really move forward with a lot more ease.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. What are your thoughts, Judy?
Well, can I just address what was
Of course.
Okay.
Isn't it nice to be the last one finally?
Well, what Claire said about siblings not being in the line to make the decisions, and what you said about Scott, I can so relate to that because I had no decision making, and when both my sisters died, and feeling like I was a non-entity.
Right.
Even
we're like a little bit invisible.
Right. I was invisible. At the Shiv at Marjorie's, I went upstairs by myself. Nobody came up to check to see that I was even there. And I think some of us, we have to, you know, it impacts us and we don't know. And I think I probably, when I lost my sister Jane, I didn't know what grief was. I didn't know what I needed, and I had nobody to say to me, or another sibling. So I'm so grateful now that I wrote the book and I found all these groups that I found people who, like all of you and people out there that speak my language, that understand. And like Jason said about the yoga, for me it's my skating. I flunked meditation, so my skating is my active meditation.
It's a moving meditation.
It's a moving meditation.
You can't flunk meditation.
I did. The quiet one I flunked.
You need to work with Jason.
We'll talk later, Judy.
The skating is my active meditation.
Yeah, no. Well, and I think, though, that's a great point, is we think that meditation has to be, oh, let me sit here, close my eyes, and Om the whole time. But that's not, in fact, the case. You can do a moving meditation. For me, it's I love running, and I've actually just been getting into cycling lately, and I get on my bike, and I just go, and, you know, and as long as you're breathing and moving, that's meditation, right? Like, that's connecting, that's connection.
That's a really good point, Jason, because people get stressed out saying, I can't meditate. There's too much pressure.
Yeah, they just maybe haven't found the right style that works for their lifestyle.
Yeah, my mom golfs, and she said when she's on the golf course, all she's thinking about is that ball.
Yeah.
She's in the present.
Yeah.
So what are things that aren't helpful? I'm going to start with Claire on this, mix it up a little bit.
So I'm going to kind of piggyback off what Judy was talking about the age. It doesn't matter how young or old, that absence, the presence is still there. And so I've worked with a lot of clients who've had pregnancy losses or like infant losses, and we've worked to talk about their other children. How will that impact moving forward? And even no matter how young they are, that is still their sibling, and how do you find that space in the family? And so I think that it's important to think about that in terms of what's not helpful is not diminishing that. Not diminishing that if it was a young loss, or not diminishing if they were, you know, we've had people come into our sibling groups that are 70 and say, you know, am I going to feel not in the right place because my sibling lived their whole life? And it's like, it doesn't matter how young or old, the absence, the presence still matters.
And if you've had your sibling in your life forever and you're 70, that's a lot of years that, I mean, who am I now without the sibling? I mean, I think in general, losing a sibling or any kind of family death, one of the things that happens is it's initially an identity loss. Who are we without our brothers and sisters? And that's a big existential question. It kind of like turns everything upside down. What is not helpful, Adam, after a sibling
Judy
loss?
gave us a very poignant example from her lived experience. It's not helpful to not put the bereaved sibling, the grieving sibling, first and foremost or equal to. So what I mean by that is, again and again at COPE and now in my personal life, I'm trying to lead with the deliberate and inclusive support that I want to give to the people I care about, particularly when there's a loss of a child in a family. For example, not only asking, how are your parents, but how are you doing? And so my hope is that no one will ever be literally or figuratively in their room alone, not being visited upon or not being asked by the people who care. So to make sure that, of course, parents who are living with the loss of a child need and deserve the support, and so do any of the surviving siblings.
Yeah, I love that. Judy?
I think what doesn't work is allowing yourself to feel and not comparing yourself to anybody else, and that there's no timeline for grief, whether it's a week, a month, 6 months, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and allowing yourself and giving yourself permission to feel what you're going to feel. If you feel like crying, if you feel like talking, if you feel like being alone, if you want to talk to somebody, and accepting that it's all part of grief, and it comes in waves, and you just have to accept that as part of it, the process.
I like that we're not judging ourselves.
Right.
Or comparing ourselves to somebody else. Because I do hear people say, I'm not doing it right, or I haven't done anything all day, I'm in my bathroom, it's 2 o'clock. I'm like, yeah, but the work of grief is a lot of work. What are your thoughts, Jason?
You know, people try to put those timelines. I do think that there's an actual internal timeline for grief, because we start to get into these habits that sometimes aren't so healthy, especially in those early stages of grief, especially if we're not dealing with it or we're putting it on the back burner, like I did it myself, so I know from experience. But I think you have to be really careful about making sure that you're looking at how you're processing it and making sure that you have the right support around you. But don't listen to what anybody else is saying, because you know it's such a unique experience, and you have to really honor that.
Yeah, I like what you're saying about coping skills, because there are, people are always saying, well, just, you know, there's coping skills out there. I said, yes, there are, and they're adaptive, but there's also maladaptive coping skills.
Yeah.
So we have to be, like you're saying, careful that we don't fall into those. I mean, if I drink a bottle of whiskey every night, that's a maladaptive coping skill.
Sure. Well, and I think there are two kinds of coping strategies that we have to think about. One is the acute ones that happen, like, this wave of grief just knocks me on my butt, and I'm sitting on the floor of my bathroom crying. How do we get ourselves up out of that? And then there's like the more proactive ones of what can we do, what rituals can we put in every single day that we can start off at least feeling a little bit better about ourselves, or a little bit, you know, more in control of our lives.
I like that idea. So give us one.
I have a bunch of them that I do. All right, so I actually have one right now. There's a little ritual that I have before I do some of my sibling stuff. It's a ballet slipper.
Oh, I love that.
And it was made from Lauren's jewelry. No one was going to wear her jewelry, so my parents melted down her gold and made 3 separate charms. One for my mom, one for my dad, and one for me. I'll put on this necklace and know that she's like close to my heart. So it's these little rituals that I do. You know, I also, the exercise is part of my ritual.
I love this. So I'm wondering, that brings in creative ways to honor like siblings' memories. So I'm going to start with Judy.
So I just, you know, I think of them, and every time I sort of go on the ice, I feel like they're sort of whispering, telling me that I've got this, because I was the shy middle sister, and so, yeah.
So and you feel like they're saying, you've got this.
You've got this, and they're always kind of with me on my shoulder, pulling me along. And, you know, I have their jewelry now, and I have, my daughter is named for my sister, and I just had a beautiful new granddaughter 5 months ago, and she's named for Margie. So
wow, I love this.
The legacy lives on, so I'm very, very grateful.
Wow. Claire, what are your thoughts about ways to honor and remember siblings?
We were talking a lot about really wonderful coping strategies that help in these memorials, and I also think that it's okay to honor them by being sad too, and just allowing yourself to sit in that. Sometimes coping is not about making yourself feel better, it's about recognizing where you are and what you're feeling, and that's just as much honoring them too. Obviously we're thinking about maladaptive and not sitting in that too much, but when I'm talking to clients, is that an okay time for you to sit in that and really spend that time there and think about, yes, I'm sad and I miss them and this is how I'm feeling. And sometimes that's a coping strategy. That's a way to honor them, is just being true to what you're feeling at that moment.
Claire, I like this, because we have to, and I always tell my students this when I'm teaching them, we have to validate and acknowledge the loss and let people be in those feelings before we can move them too quickly towards hope.
Yes.
Because if we move them too quickly, we're minimizing what they've been through. And I'm always saying, you know, anything that starts with at least bothers me. At least it was fast. At least he was young. At least this. At least that. Like, allow people to say, you know, it's really hard. It's really tough. It's been a lot. Let them have those feelings. And then move them slowly into hope. You know, whenever I do any events or any webinars or any shows, I take a picture of my brother and I put it near me so that I can see it, so that I remind myself why I'm doing what I'm doing. Like, I wouldn't even be in this space if my brother was still here.
And I would just echo that if we didn't love so much, we wouldn't grieve so hard. And if we didn't have so much joy, because we love. So it's finding that balance, and it's really hard.
Absolutely. And Adam?
Well, I know we all share a core value that not only does no one have to grieve alone, but certainly and especially siblings don't need to be the forgotten or the invisible grievers, and to reach out for help and support when you're ready, as soon as you're ready, whether it's to Open Hope, to Judy, to Compassionate Friends, to Cope at copefoundation.org. Reach out for a lifeline and find support for yourself or other resources that are in your community. You don't need to grieve alone.
I love this, Adam. So copefoundation.org
That's right.
is where they find you.
Yep.
And everything that you're offering to siblings, and there's so much. Please check out copefoundation.org.
That's right.
Claire, you also have a practice.
You can also find me at copefoundation.org or at clairesharkeytherapy.com.
Very good. And Jason?
So you can get your name on my email list at siblingisland.com, and I send out weekly updates about all of our online meetings. We have them every week. And personally, you can find me on social media, on Facebook, TikTok. I'm actually on TikTok and,
Wow,
and
love it.
Instagram under Inspired Bereaved Sibling.
Inspired Bereaved Sibling. Now, I've got to say, for any siblings out there, Jason puts together a newsletter with a lot of resources and a lot of virtual groups. And I love how connected and close your virtual group has gotten, because you haven't met each other, a lot of you, right?
Correct. We met, the first time we met was at the Compassionate Friends Conference in Denver. I met about I think we had about maybe 8 or 9 people that from my online platform that came to meet each other in person for the first time. Yeah,
That's
at
incredible.
The conference.
That's amazing. And Judy?
You can reach me at judylipson.org.
judylipson.org. Well, thank all of you for what you do to build awareness for sibling loss. It is so important and so mind-boggling to me that it is not front and center in everybody's mind, because most people will spend 80 to 100% of their lifetimes with their siblings. So it is an important loss, and it is a very significant loss, as you all know. And thank you for joining us today. If you want to see a podcast with Adam, Claire, Jason, and Judy, please go to opentohope.com, because I've had them on our podcasts. And thank you all for joining me today. And I just want to say to everybody out there, if you've lost hope, please lean on ours until you find your own, and God bless.